Kubernetes didn't just grow up alone. An entire sprawling ecosystem literally exploded around it. And this landscape of tools, it's the engine that powers modern cloud computing. But man, it can also be incredibly confusing to navigate. So today, we're going to bring some order to that chaos. In this explainer, you're going to get a really clear picture of what the CNCF is, why it matters so much, and how it actually shapes the very systems that run our digital world.
This is AI Tech Cheat Code, where we break down modern tech without all the noise.
Now, let's understand how this ecosystem actually works. First, we'll define what the CNCF even is. Then, we'll look at the massive problem it was created to solve. After that, we'll see how projects kind of grow up inside its structure, cover some super common mistakes, and finally, look at how these tools all come together to build real-world systems.
Okay, so let's get right into it. Section 1. What is the CNCF? Think of it as the foundation for the entire cloud-native world. So, at its heart, the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, or CNCF for short, is an open-source software foundation. It's a part of the bigger Linux Foundation, and its main job, its whole purpose, is to be a vendor-neutral home for super-critical cloud-native projects. Now, what does vendor-neutral actually mean? It means no single company, not Google, not Amazon, not Microsoft, owns or controls these core technologies. This is huge because it builds trust and encourages everyone to collaborate. It basically stops the entire industry from getting locked into one company's way of doing things.
And you really can't tell the story of the CNCF without talking about Kubernetes. It all started back in the early 2000s when Google was running these massive applications on an internal system they called Borg. Fast forward to 2014, and they decided to open source a version of it. But they knew they needed a neutral place for it to live, a place where it could grow beyond just Google. So, in 2015, they teamed up with the Linux Foundation and created the CNCF. That Borg project, it got a rewrite, a new name, Kubernetes, and it became the very first project ever donated to this brand new foundation.
So, that brings us right to the CNCF's mission. The big, ultimate goal is to make cloud-native computing ubiquitous. I mean, they want it to be the standard way we build and run software, period. And they do this by nurturing this huge ecosystem of projects, by being that all-important neutral home, and by setting common standards so that all these different tools can actually work together. The endgame? To empower everyone to build modern, scalable, and secure applications without being tied to any one cloud provider.
So we know what the CNCF is, but the bigger question is, why does it even need to exist? What problem is it really solving? Well, in a nutshell, it's all about bringing order to absolute chaos.
And let's really think about this for a second. Why was a neutral foundation so critical? I mean, what was the world actually like before it showed up?
Before the CNCF, the landscape was a total mess. It was fragmented. You had this wild west of competing tools that were often totally incompatible with each other. This led to a huge problem, vendor lock-in. You were basically stuck with whatever proprietary services your cloud provider gave you. And if you built your app on their tools, moving it somewhere else was a nightmare, sometimes nearly impossible. There were just no common standards. The CNCF completely flipped this. It created a curated ecosystem where tools are designed to work together. It championed portability so you have the freedom to run your apps anywhere. And maybe most importantly, it established open, community-driven governance to create the standards that we're so desperately missing. Okay, so we get the why. Now let's dig into the how. How does the CNCF actually manage this giant ecosystem of projects? Well, it has this really clear process for how projects grow up, a journey we can call the maturity pipeline. A project's journey inside the CNCF has 3 very clear stages. It all starts in the sandbox. This is like the playground for new early-stage projects that have a lot of potential. If a project starts to get some real traction, proves it's stable, and people start using it in the real world, it can move up to the incubating stage. This is where it gets more support and mentorship. And then finally, the most mature, widely used, and battle-tested projects reach graduated status. These are the pillars of the cloud-native world, the ones you can really bet on. And this table here really breaks down the nitty-gritty for each stage. See that? To move from sandbox to incubating, a project has to be used in production by at least 3 different companies. And to graduate, it needs to show massive adoption and, this is super important, have committers from at least 2 different organizations. That's the secret sauce to preventing any one company from controlling a graduated project. Each stage has a clear goal. Sandbox is for developing ideas, incubation is for proving stability, and graduation means it's considered a reliable, production-ready standard.
Hey, if this is making sense so far, do me a quick favor and give the explainer a quick like. It really helps a lot. All right, let's talk about the common mistakes that trip people up. Seriously, think of this section as the cheat code to really getting the CNCF and avoiding the same traps everyone else falls into. We're going to break down the 3 biggest mistakes that people make when they first jump into this whole ecosystem. Mistake number 1, and this is by far the most common, is thinking the CNCF is a single product you can just go download. It's not. The CNCF is a foundation. It's an umbrella organization. It doesn't write any code itself. It provides the governance, the support, and the home for hundreds of different projects that are built by the community. The second huge mistake is assuming that just because a project is in the CNCF, it's automatically ready for production. Nope, definitely not the case. Remember, the foundation is home to projects at every single stage of their life, from wild experiments to rock-solid technologies used by the biggest companies in the world. You can't just pick one at random and hope for the best. And that brings us right to mistake number 3, completely ignoring the maturity levels. This chart says it all, right? The vast majority of projects, we're talking over 100 of them, are in the sandbox. A much smaller group is incubating, and just a select few have actually graduated. The big takeaway here is you have to evaluate projects based on where they are in this journey. Trusting a critical production system to a sandbox project, that is just a recipe for disaster. This is why that maturity pipeline is so important to understand. And let's be real for a second. This is where the CNCF ecosystem can start to feel completely overwhelming. I mean, with hundreds of projects, all at different levels of maturity, where do you even start? It's a totally valid feeling, but that structure we just talked about is your map. So let's make this all real. In this last section, we're going to connect all these ideas to the real world and see what you can actually build using CNCF tools. Okay, the most fundamental use case is, of course, container orchestration. Kubernetes is the star of the show here. It's the system for automating basically everything about running containers. But here's the thing. Kubernetes doesn't do it alone. It needs a container runtime, like Containerd or CRIO, to actually run the containers. And then, to manage all the applications on top of Kubernetes, the community relies on Helm. Just think of Helm like an app store for Kubernetes. It makes it super simple to find and install even really complex software. Another massive area is observability, which is just a fancy way of saying understanding what the heck is going on inside your systems. The CNCF gives you the whole toolkit for this. You've got Prometheus, which is the gold standard for collecting metrics, the numbers that tell you how your system is performing. For logs, the text output from your apps, you have tools like Fluentd. And to follow a single request as it jumps between a bunch of different microservices, you use distributed tracing with tools like Jaeger and OpenTelemetry. Together, those 3, metrics, logs, and traces, give you full-stack observability. And finally, how do you get your code into these systems in the first place? Well, for modern app delivery, or CI/CD, the CNCF has amazing projects like Argo and Flux, which are built around a practice called GitOps. Basically, your Git repository becomes the single source of truth for your entire system. Then, to manage all the network traffic flowing between your services, you have powerful tools like the Envoy proxy and service meshes like Linkerd. These handle all the complex routing and security, so your developers don't have to worry about it. All right, let's do a quick final recap of the absolute key takeaways. First, the CNCF is a neutral foundation, a safe home for the open source projects that run the cloud. It all kicked off with Kubernetes, which is still its most famous project. Remember those 3 critical stages, sandbox, incubating, and graduated? It's vital to know where a project stands. The whole point of this, the core value, is to prevent vendor lock-in by pushing for open standards. And when you put it all together, this incredible ecosystem is what allows companies everywhere to build the modern, scalable, and resilient systems we all depend on. Now, we've really only just scratched the surface of all the projects out there. So in the next explainer, we're going to take a deep dive into that famous and kind of crazy CNCF landscape diagram and break down more of the key projects category by category. If you like this content and you learned something from us, please subscribe to this channel for more updates like this. And hey, share this on all your social networks. It really helps us out. Thanks for watching.